Welcome to Psyched for Psychology, a Nystrom & Associates podcast. Our hosts, Michelle Iverson and Brett Cushing, are both licensed marriage and family therapists at Nystrom & Associates. Each week, they talk about all things mental health and therapy, and you get a chance to dive into specific psychology topics that help promote personal development and wellness. And now, here are your hosts, Michelle and Brett.
Welcome to another episode of Psyched for Psychology. We are talking today, we're continuing our work on our holiday stress series. We're getting closer and closer to some of the big holidays coming up in December, which also sometimes means closer and closer to stress for a lot of people.
A lot of stress. Mm-hmm. You know, when I think about it, this time of year is probably the most stressful, I think, because of all the expectations, the things we have to do. It reminds me of a movie. We're big on movies.
Yes, we are.
I don't know have you ever seen the one with
Die
Steve
Hard?
Martin?
Perfect Christmas movie?
The perfect Christmas movie, yeah. You just kind of want to nestle up around the fire and one of those feel-good movies. No, and this one isn't a Christmas one either, but there's a line in there that resonates. It's Parenthood with Steve Martin. Have you ever seen it?
Oh, I haven't seen it.
Oh, it's great. Well, yeah, they're going through all the stresses of marriage and having kids and demands on time. And they're in the middle of a fight. And he said, I got to go lead our kids' baseball team in the last place. And she said, do you really have to go? And he turned around and he just said it in such a way that it really resonated with me. He said, my whole life is have to. And I really resonated with that as a parent, but I think it is something that accurately describes this season. We love this season, but it does feel like right now, my whole life for the next 30 days is I have to.
Have to and should and get through the next day. And is that really what the season is supposed to be about? I don't think so.
Right. It is interesting when you say that it's supposed to be about, because it's funny. I always hear that every year, you know, the real meaning of the season and what the season should be about, supposed to be about. So we're always kind of appealing to how something more idyllic than how it is.
We do the opposite.
Right.
In reality.
Right. Yeah, nicely put. So here's some 11 things that Americans dread about Christmas. And this have to that we kind of find ourselves on sort of the rat race with. And this is by Consumer Reports and National Research Center. So 68% of us really feel this sense of dread and anxiety over crowds and long lines. Mm-hmm. That's probably the greatest stressor for people this season. It's crowds and long lines, 68%. 37% say gaining weight is a big stressor for them, or in my case, gaining more weight. And this is interesting, 37% said getting into debt. Mm-hmm. I would have thought it would have been a little bit higher, actually, just because of all the expenditures. And related to that, 28% find gift shopping highly stressful. 25% said traveling. Mm-hmm. I know I'm stressed. My daughter's coming in from North Carolina and so excited. We missed her last year because of COVID. Oh, and so we're worried, you know, what about sickness? What about cancellations and weather? So much out of our control. 24% seeing certain relatives. It's like we get stressed about that. 23% said seasonal music, which I found very surprising. And
I don't.
Really?
Because it stresses me out.
It's like, enough already. Yeah. You know, it's funny because as we were preparing this for this week, we're talking about expectations. Next week, we're talking about boundaries. And I just kind of realized that if I were to sum it all up, some of the stressors of this holiday season is I either have too much or I feel like I'm not enough.
Right.
And boy, music can be, I get that. Music can be one of those too much kind of categories.
You know, controversial opinions, so people might not like this. Mariah Carey. You hear the song. We all know the song. And at the start of the holiday season, it's like, oh, okay, this is nice. I haven't heard this song for a while, but by the end of the season, nails on a chalkboard.
Right.
I can't hear that song again.
Yeah, no, there are certain ones. It's like definitely falls into too much. Whereas other people, it's not enough. We can start in July with Christmas music.
Right, carry all year long.
Yeah. No, closely related to this is interesting in their study, is that 15% of us found that a lot of the stress we have is this expectation to be nice.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's hard. Think about that. We talk about all this stress, and there is this expectation. Everyone has to be happy, and there's peace and joy, and that is a real stressor for people. So these are some of the common things that people find really stressful and taxing, living up to all these expectations of the season. Yes.
So we were going to talk about that in more depth today. And I think a big part of why it's important to talk about managing holiday expectations is because of, just like you said, we put that expectation. I have to feel this way in this holiday season. And so there's actually been some research done, and this idea of the broken promise theory. And it's this idea that your mood is even more influenced by this time of year in the holiday season, and not necessarily in a positive way, because holidays are promoting things like hope and magic, and your mood will be improved, making that promise. But if that expectation is not being met, that individual is probably going to get frustrated, is probably going to get disappointed. And so that can really see a significant negative impact potentially on somebody's mental health. So they kind of talk about how if we associate the season, it could be with enjoyment. For some people, dread. For some people, I think most people, maybe a mix of things in between. Getting prepared for the holiday and looking at what are my expectations, how do I manage these in a realistic way, can actually really go a long ways to help us kind of reclaim and take back taking care of ourselves and having a better mental health throughout the season. Kind of recognizing what's realistic, figure out what feels overwhelming to you, and especially to Brett's last point, how are we not overexerting ourselves just to appease other people?
It makes total sense, because when we think about expectations, oftentimes when we live our daily lives throughout the year and our expectations aren't met, we have real frustration and consternation. It's, we're driving and, I got to get there, and suddenly there's a traffic jam, and we know we get frustrated about that. When we are at work and somebody does something or something doesn't pan out the way we want, we are frustrated because we had a certain expectation. We come home and our partner is in a mood less than what we wanted from them. We are disappointed, and so there's stress normally throughout the year. But when we look at this period, this month, if you will, of the holidays, there's so many expectations, and they're not all realistic, but we still strive towards them. So it makes total sense that we are going to be having more disappointment, more frustration, more opportunity for real sadness as well.
Yeah. And we're going to talk too about setting boundaries, because that's a very important aspect of this, but we are actually going to do that in an entirely separate episode. We're going to do that one next week. So make sure to tune in for that one as well too, because these two topics go hand in hand.
Right. If you think about it, we're talking about this today in terms of expectations. Expectations are really centered upon how we're thinking and our cognitive ideas. We have these ideas in our mind, perceptions, expectations are all kind of things that occur within our mind. And so we tend to be very cognitive, behavioral in our approaches. So we tend to think like how we think is going to affect how we behave. And how we behave then relates to the boundaries we set based upon these, what we would say are cognitive distortions that are just not realistic and aligned with reality. So yeah, it's kind of a cognitive behavioral approach we're taking. So it really is a two-part series here.
Absolutely. So should we tackle one of our big holiday expectations?
What do you want to start with? There are so many big ones. Where should we start?
I think just social ones in general. how much time we're spending with people throughout the holiday season and who we are spending our time with throughout as well too.
And it's interesting that we talk about that because with COVID last year, we didn't have much of that. So it'll be interesting for many of us to go through this season and compare and contrast what it was like with last year when we didn't do as much and we couldn't do as much social. Was that kind of a blessing in disguise or not? Well, what do you think?
I think one of my first questions actually is asking ourselves now, what expectations am I putting on myself? And what do I think, or could I be wrong, about what others might be putting on me? Because I think, again, with COVID, I think there can sometimes be almost an over push now of, well, now I have to make up for all that time and spend all of my time with everybody, and how much of that is going to be realistic for you. Even for my family, we have family members in Minnesota, in Texas, in South Dakota. How would we possibly travel and go and see everybody in such a short period of time? We couldn't. But yet many people are doing that to themselves all season long, or making themselves feel guilty if they don't meet sometimes these really, really high and unrealistic expectations.
Right. I think sometimes some unrealistic expectations in my family is we love being together, but we don't always get to be together because we're all in different places. And so I think an unrealistic expectation is that we have to be every moment now, we have to be together. And that's just not realistic because some of us are extroverts, some of us are introverts, some of us...
Which one's Brett?
Well, I actually am a little bit of both. I need my time, but I know I grew up. I absolutely love being with my family, and I tried to live up to that expectation. Okay, we have to spend every moment together, and I was completely out of touch with what I needed. Because even though I'm very extroverted, I do need my downtime. Yeah. And I didn't pay attention to that. And so that was, kind of to your point, that was an expectation of the family that I allowed to be put on myself. And I adopted that expectation. And then after the holidays, I'd be wiped out. Okay, I need another holiday just
to recover from the holiday.
Right? Yeah. So it speaks a lot to these unrealistic social expectations.
Yeah. And I think even trying to figure out, how can I give myself permission to have to set boundaries, which again, next episode we'll go into more on how to do that, but to also say, I don't have to attend every single social function. And I want to make sure that I respect that other people are busy too. So even if I'm hosting something in my place, I've got to respect too if people aren't able to make it to mine. Because again, we are all trying to meet a lot of expectations throughout this time of year.
And I just realized too, in addition to that, we have in-laws. And we have in-laws who have in-laws. And so not everybody can spend all of that time with us. And we have to allow ourselves to be disappointed that, we're not going to get as much time with this family or that family member because they have in-laws that they're going to see as well. And so it's almost like we don't allow disappointment because I have to be joyful.
Again, yes, remember the have to,
right.
The broken promises, right?
Yeah.
There's one of them. Yeah, there's one of them right there. And we can start to recognize that. I think we talk about DBT a lot on the podcast too, right? We don't want to engage in that black and white thinking either. The holiday season is joyous and magical and all these wonderful things, or it's nothing. Right?
Oh yeah, my adrenaline. I could feel my adrenaline start to go when you mentioned when I say
DBT.
Yeah, right. And specifically that all or nothing thinking, because it is endemic to this time of year. Everything, and here I'm being that way now. I say everything. So many things are categorized as all or nothing. I have to be at this social event. I have to be at that. Because it's not just holidays with our family. It's my kids' events and also church events. Oh my goodness. All these church events. And then I've got work parties. And this is just not realistic.
Absolutely.
So what's another one? When we think about social.
When we think about social, we think about financial. This is a big one this time of year. How much we're spending. Much more, I think, on everybody's minds, given kind of the higher inflation and costs going on. And so, thinking about when we think about what we remember most about the holidays growing up, it tends to be traditions and routines, right? What was it that made it special? And honestly, were there things that even required money to make it happen? What would it be like to start to take a look at, of course, like doing things like creating a budget, kind of working on ahead of time, what's going to be kind of our plan to stick to it. But that reminder of not spending all of our resources on gifts in order to try to fulfill that broken promises theory, right? To make it be magical and joyous and all these wonderful things. What instead we could kind of look at, a lot of what we get hit with is marketing, right? You need the hot new toy of the year for the kids, and certainly not engaging into any catastrophic thinking of, the kids' year will be ruined if they happen to not get something.
Right. And so I think what's also inherent within that, and we're talking about it already at our family, because we've moved from everybody giving a list of what they want, which seems sort of like, it almost feels like I'm running an errand for you.
Right. I'm going shopping. Give me your list. I'll go.
I'll just I'll pick up some milk and whatever else you want. And so now we've moved away from that, and we're saying, all right, we're just going to do Secret Santa, and we're going to get somebody a gift. But the anxiety I'm hearing within all of us, and even within myself, like, is this going to be the right gift? I don't know. Will this person like it or not? And so trying to meet the other people's expectations and realizing I can't meet other people's expectations, nor am I responsible to meet other people's expectations. But that is counter to what our culture kind of preaches at us, that no, it's got to be the greatest gift. And you have to really sort of give them this euphoric kind of experience when they open that gift and you go, oh, wow, this is awesome. And anything less than that is kind of you bombed out on the gift thing.
I think that's almost its own expectation as well, too. We've got the financial expectations, again, not just gifts, but spending money on travel, on, just parties, things that are going on this time of year, but then gift expectations too, right? Especially for those families, if you're a kid and you just kind of know like, hey, I think our kids we might have to expect a different Christmas than usual this year. What we kind of say is actually a lot of kids do really well with transparency, right? We can have some really good age appropriate conversations with them, and being honest, but then also, again, talking with kids, we can help them to deal with disappointment. That's a wonderful skill to learn. And also about how we can still achieve things like gratitude or giving to others, even if it's giving of not necessarily, again, financial resources, but time, right? And care and love. To be able to do that with other people is going to, again, reinforce, I think, a lot of things that we really want to see happen in the holiday season.
I love what you're saying, too, because it's a different paradigm to look at with the holidays. Because what I'm hearing you say is, let's not only focus on gifting. There's another approach towards the holidays that can be very healthy. And it's not just gifting, it's growing.
Yes.
How can I grow? How can my kids grow? How can we as a family grow? And when we are unable to live up to certain expectations, that is a prime time for growth to happen. So we can embrace that, and we can get bitter that our expectations weren't met, and we can embrace that as an opportunity to get better rather than bitter and grow. And wow, that can be a wonderful time. Like, I remember, can I share a fun story?
Yes.
My mom made this crown roast for Christmas, and it's exciting. It's just, if anybody doesn't know what a crown roast is, you kind of have these, like, the meat's kind of in this crown, and then you have like the stuff you put in the middle, and then you put like some bourbon or something on top of it, and you light it on fire, and you bring it in, and
it is like a spectacular show.
You have like 20 seconds of excitement. And so my mom's bringing it out of the oven. She's worked so hard on this, and it drops and falls on the floor. Now, your reaction was exactly the same as my brothers and I. My poor mom growing up with 3 boys, our response was just kind of laughing and like, but also, and Christmas is ruined because the crown roast had fallen. And so when the expectation wasn't met, we could get bitter and sort of all or nothing, say, oh, Christmas is ruined, the meal is terrible. And yet it was an opportunity to sort of embrace it and say, well, laugh a little bit, empathize with mom. Like, oh, mom, you worked so hard. Thanks for all you did. It's all great. And what do we do now? We still laugh about it. Mm-hmm. We still laugh about, what happened. But it also reminds me of a Christmas Vacation movie. Talk about expectations continually not being met. But it is, and I love what you're saying, Michelle, it's a great opportunity to move towards and lean into those expectations not being met and say, how can I grow and how can we collectively grow?
Exactly. I can't remember if this was during the holiday, but you completely reminded me of the time that our German Shepherd got up on the counter and ate the whole turkey that we had. So the dog ate well that year.
Wow. Well, somebody got to. Somebody got to enjoy it.
Somebody got to.
Yeah. Wow.
And honestly, that is the memory, and we can look back and laugh on it now. I'm sure my parents did not find that funny at the time. But that is a part of really what kind of makes holidays and our time together special.
It is. When I think about it, a lot of things that we end up laughing about are the things that went wrong when our expectations weren't met. And it reminds me of one of our earlier episodes that many people have enjoyed is laughter really the best medicine? Right. And it's so helpful when our expectations are not being met. It's hard, and it's also something we can embrace and really have fun with.
And laughter is one of your strategies that you were thinking about too for how to help manage expectations and those feelings that time of year.
Yeah, we can choose to look at things and find a funny side to it, but we have to be careful because we could laugh at the crown roast. In the moment, my mom needed a little consolation. Okay, so my brothers and I may not have been the best therapists in the moment, but we didn't do it in front of her. But so you need to validate that, this is hard, and it's really important to lead with that validation of this is hard, this stinks. If we move too quickly into laughing about it, it seems so dismissive of there's disappointment here. And so it's okay to validate it, and it's totally okay to move beyond and say, all right, well, we're going to make the best of this and we can laugh. So I think it's important to have first that element of validation, and then you can have some elation, some laughter with it, and that will stick more than anything as the years go by.
What other strategies could we use to help manage expectations, manage feelings of disappointment if they occur?
Yeah, no, I think what we wanted to do is give some practical things for us, because I think we can all relate to, oh man, this is a stressful time. And so there is some sense of validation when we talk about how hard it is, but let's keep it practical too. And one of the things I think is we talk about being generous with our gifts. And sometimes we use money and gifts as a way to try to express our love. And I just wanted to suggest being generous, not only in our gifting, but be generous in our thinking about each other, in our thinking about ourselves as well. We need to be generous, and not just when we're with the family, but when 68% of the people, their biggest stressor are the crowds and the shopping lines. And so we can be generous. And I had a lady cut in front of me at Costco the other day. There was this line. It almost went to the end of the store,
It was bad,
and so I am like, all right, well, I'll just, kind of hang in here and be on my phone the entire time. And so I'm just about up there, and some lady whizzes in, cuts right in front of me, no apology. And I was so tempted. I had the strong urge to make some sarcastic comment that would have been really funny. At that time, laughter was probably not the best medicine, but I needed to choose to think the best of her. And it's hard because it's not just those people. It's that difficult family member that always drives us nuts. And we'll talk about boundaries, and they kind of crash our boundaries. They're insensitive. And those cause anxiety for us. But we can choose to be generous, not only in our gifts, but how we think about that person. And that person might really be in a hurry, and they're just, maybe I've done that to people too. In a general way, what I think we can be generous about in our thoughts is just believe people are doing the best they can. I'm doing the best I can. Somebody cuts me off, in a parking spot, it's hard to believe they're doing the best they can.
And that you are too. We really want to emphasize that point. It's not just being generous in that thinking, but thinking to yourself as well.
Why
right?
do you say that? Why is that important?
I think because, again, we're going back to, we've got so many of these shoulds and have tos that we have to keep kind of bringing that grace and that understanding to ourselves as well. That I am a person with limited resources and limited time, and quite often limited energy. And there's only so much that I can do, and that's okay.
I absolutely love that. Much of our stress is, we talk about it external, and we did talk about stress in one of our other episodes, and the difference between stressors and stress. And much is happening outside of us are stressors. How we choose to think about it will determine if it's actually stress in our lives. And the way we counter that is by being generous. I love what you're saying. And my favorite word, grace. Let's give some grace to ourselves that I'm doing the best I can. Yeah. And yeah, I can do better, but I'm doing the best I can. And so is this person. And I really think if we can be generous with others and with ourselves and how we think, we're going to enjoy the holidays much better, because we're really countering that all or nothing kind of expectation.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I can think of. Choosing to think that. Also, I think you mentioned it before, the shoulds. And it's closely related about, countering, all the expectations by being generous in our thoughts. People should on us, and we should on ourselves primarily.
And don't censor us. We were saying should.
That's not what that is what I said.
Brett was like, wait.
I was thinking something else. The two are kind of synonymous in my mind because it is so toxic to us, But thank you for that. We don't have a bleep thing here. So.
We don't.
So I think, part of it is just noticing and identifying the shoulds. Where you put the Christmas tree is one of those. It's like, it really should be over here, or it should be over there, and then we get into a fight about that. And so we need to be aware of that, and sometimes it's really subtle. And so I'd encourage all of us, go into it, know that people are going to do that, because we're wrapped up in all these unrealistic expectations that it should be this way, you should be this way, it shouldn't be that way. And just say, it can be something else, and pivot away from that. But I think also what happens is we need not only manage these expectations. What happens with the expectations is we're going to have emotions. And sometimes we're not going to realize the expectations that we get hooked into. And then we don't realize it until our emotions are really high. And so what do we do kind of quickly here at the end? What do we do to manage those emotions? Well, I would say, first of all, let's be mindful. What am I thinking and feeling? I left work yesterday and I heard this beep, on my car, and it said, low fuel. If you want with me to direct you to the nearest gas station. I'm like, oh man, I don't want to deal with this now. I don't have time to deal with it. But if I didn't deal with it, I would have a lot of problems, and it's cold and it's snowy here. So I needed to stop. But what's cool is I had a gauge that flashed, and there was a sound, and it caught my attention. Our emotions are basically that gauge to get us to pay attention. And so maybe we need to really pay attention on a daily basis throughout the holidays. How am I feeling? What are my emotions telling me? And so what I tell people is this, like when we're at an 8, 9, 10 out of 10, and we could, maybe we're into a political discussion with family. I encourage not to go
don't
there.
Do that this season.
Encourage us not to go there. But, we get into a fight or something and emotions are running high. Our urge is to continue to fight a lot of times. And so I always say, if you're finding your emotions super high, terminate, isolate, meditate, and then re-relate. So in other words, like terminate what's going on. This is not effective. And it's hard because our urge is to keep going. Our emotions are high, but the rational part of the brain shuts down. So we need to just terminate that. And then isolate for a while. Go for a walk. Pet the dog. Do something by yourself and meditate a little. Not like meditate on, boy, Michelle is so unreasonable.
Always.
But, kind of meditate on What's going on? Why is this bothering me? And then go back and relate again. Now you're going to relate differently because your emotions are down. And one thing we can do is just say, hey, I'm sorry, I just got really riled up. That's all it takes.
For adults, I call it taking a self timeout.
Yes.
We need them too. They're not just for kids.
Boy, that'd be a great episode. Timeouts, not just for kids. I love that. Sometimes we just need to also, if our emotions are just kind of ramping up, just take a little vacation, a 5, a 10 minute, an hour vacation. Name the emotion. What am I feeling? What's going on with me? Do a lot of breathing. What's going on? And you do those deep inhalations. You breathe in through your nose from your diaphragm. You hold it, and then you breathe out slowly through your mouth. And all that does is it activates our parasympathetic nervous system to get us to calm down again. So take those little vacations, do some deep breathing, and really be mindful, always checking in. Where are my emotions? So these are some practical things I think we can do to manage our expectations and manage our emotions.
And I think I really want to emphasize as we wrap up, thinking about the fact, seek help if you need it. And that's another big thing we tend to not do over the holidays is request for help, whether it's from other people, friends, family, or from a therapist. A lot of people think, well, this is just temporary. It's just the season. Why would I go see a therapist just to get through the holiday season? But if you're feeling like I am white knuckling it to get through day by day, that is actually what we're here for as well, too.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. When I was a pastor, I did a lot of counseling, and it was like right before Thanksgiving to the end of the year, my counseling aspect of my job really increased because there's also like so much loss. We didn't even talk about that. All the loss of previous family members over the past years. We've had people die of COVID, a couple of years ago, and we have loss of traditions because families change and things. So that's a big thing to be thinking about and seek help. I don't know about you. It seems like I'm busier and my clients are feeling the stress and I hear about it right now. So I love what you're saying. And it really goes back to what you're saying earlier too. Use this time, not just for gifting, but also for growing.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And again, if you really like this episode, next week, tune in to talk more about boundaries, especially during this time of the year. We hope that you have a wonderful holiday season, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you as always for listening, and please be sure to leave us a review. While this podcast can't be a replacement for therapy, we hope you enjoyed our discussion today and join us again next time. Nystrom & Associates is always available to those who are struggling. If you find yourself in need of support and help, please check us out at nystromcounseling.com.